There was a winter in New York when Neville had no money, none. The wind came through the walls of the room he could barely afford, and he came to me, young, thin, certain of nothing except that he wanted to go home, to Barbados. And he told me the truth of his situation, the price of the ticket, the emptiness of his pockets, the impossibility of it. He laid it all out for me like a man presenting evidence in a courtroom, waiting for the judge to agree that his case was hopeless. I let him finish, and then I told him the thing that changed the entire course of his life. I said, "Nev, you don't go to Barbados. You are in Barbados. Sit with that for a moment. Not you will go. Not you are going to find a way. You are already there. That was the whole instruction. That was everything. I know why you found this tonight. You didn't stumble here. Nothing stumbles into the right hands. Somewhere in the next few days a number is going to arrive. A bill, a balance, a message about money that would normally send that familiar drop through your stomach, that cold, fast panic you already know the shape of. And this time, I want you to hear me say this before it happens. You are going to feel nothing. Still unmoved, almost bored by it, and you're going to wonder, quietly, where that stillness came from. It came from tonight. I want to look at you the way I looked at Neville that night, because I can see the pattern in you plainly, and there is no shame in it, only recognition. You have been trying to manifest money, and that word, trying, is the whole disease. It is the sound of a person straining towards something instead of a person who already possesses it. Nobody strains toward what they already have in their hand. Here is the pattern, precisely, and I want you to notice how exactly it names you. You affirm abundance in the morning, and then, an hour later, you check the balance. You visualize the check arriving, and then you go looking for evidence that it's on its way. You speak the words of a wealthy person, and then you live the day like someone auditing a case against themselves, and every single check, every glance, every little search for proof is a confession. It says, silently, underneath all the affirming, it hasn't happened yet. You are not failing because you lack discipline. Understand that clearly, because it matters. You have worked harder at this than most people ever will. You've read the books, you've done the exercises, you've spoken the words into mirrors at midnight when no one else believed you. That effort was real, and I will not let you call it wasted. It was simply pointed at the wrong target, at the world, instead of at the one who makes the world. You were commanding lack while begging for wealth, and the universe, which is not cruel, simply gave you exactly what you commanded. Let me tell you about a man who came to Neville years ago, because his story is your story, wearing different clothes. He was earning $75 a week, and he was deeply unhappy about it. Not because he was greedy, not because he wanted more than his share, but because something in him knew, with total certainty, that he was worth far more than what he was receiving. He said as much, in his own words. He felt the gap between what he was and what he was being paid, and it ate at him. Now here is the mistake, and I want you to see it clearly, because it is the exact mistake almost everyone in this position makes. He was waiting for the world to recognize his worth. He was waiting for his employer to notice. He was waiting for the market to shift, for the right conversation to happen, for someone above him to finally see what he already knew about himself. He had made himself a subject waiting for a verdict from a court that was never going to convene. Neville did not tell him to work harder. He did not tell him to ask for a raise, to update his resume, to network, to hustle. He told him something far stranger and far simpler. He told him to assume the feeling of already being the man who earns what he is worth. Not to hope for it, not to work toward it, to assume it, to sleep in that identity at night, to walk through his days already being that man, already carrying himself as one who commanded that income, whether or not a single external fact had changed. And the man did this. And what happened, as Neville reported it, is that his circumstances rearranged themselves. A new commission structure came into being, not through some scheme he engineered, but simply because the shape of his outer life had to bend to match the shape of his inner conviction. He found himself, in time, earning something in the neighborhood of $600 a month. Multiply that difference out across the arithmetic of that era, and you understand, this was not a small change. This was a complete transformation of his financial life. And it began the moment he stopped waiting for the world to hand him a verdict and started being, quietly, in private, the man the verdict would have described. He didn't get the money and then feel worthy. He became worthy, inwardly, first, and the money was forced to follow. That is the entire law. Everything else you have ever read on this subject is commentary on that one sentence. Now, before I give you the full mechanism, because there is more, and I want you to have all of it, let me hand you something. I can see you're ready for it tonight, not next week, tonight. What you're learning in this teaching is one movement of a fuller nightly practice, and I want to be completely honest with you about that, because I think it will bring you relief rather than more work. Most people who study this only ever do one part of it. They visualize a new state, but they never clear the disturbances of the day first, so the visualization has to fight through static to reach anywhere. Or they revise their day faithfully, but they never learn to fall asleep inside the new state itself, so the revision clears the ground but plants nothing in it. That is why your results have felt like lightning in a bottle. Sometimes it works. Sometimes nothing seems to move at all. And I want you to hear this clearly. It was never you failing. The routine you were using was simply incomplete. A partial tool used faithfully will still only produce partial results. That is not a flaw in you. That is arithmetic. So I wrote something short, and I made it free, because I could see this exact moment coming for you. It's called Rewrite Tonight. It is a complete 3-minute pre-sleep revision protocol. How to identify the 3 moments from your day that are quietly disturbing your sleep without you even noticing. How to revise each one so the subconscious carries a clean record into the night instead of a wounded one, and how to feel the clearing happen before you drift off. It is free, it is immediate, it is the first link in the description below this video. Open it tonight, before you do anything else. Or, if it's simpler for you, comment the single word, reset, and I will make sure you're pointed to it. There is also a fuller version if you want to go further once you feel what the free guide does for you. A complete 7-night, 4-part guided practice called the Transfer Protocol, also through that same link. For those who want the entire structure laid out night by night, it is $27. But hear me, you do not need it tonight. Tonight, start with what's free. Start with reset. And when you type that word, I want you to feel what you're actually doing. Don't do it as a comment. Do it as a declaration that you are done borrowing your sense of power from a paycheck, done flinching at a number on a screen, done waiting, like that man on $75 a week, for the world to finally hand you what was always yours to command. Now, let me give you the mechanism itself, because everything I've said so far is preparation for this one understanding. And once you have it, you will never see money the same way again. You do not attract money. I want you to release that word from your vocabulary entirely. Attract implies distance. implies pulling something toward you from somewhere else, implies that the money exists out there and your job is to lure it in like a fish to bait. That is not what is happening. You issue money. You command it. From the state of already being wealthy, wealth appears, because that is simply how consciousness operates. It does not attract its reflection. It produces it. Money is not a thing you pull toward you. Money is a reflection of a state of consciousness. Change the state, and the reflection has no choice but to change with it. None. It cannot lag forever, and it cannot refuse forever, because it isn't independent of you in the first place. It is you in a form you haven't recognized yet. Here is the line I want living in you after tonight. The one I will repeat, because it deserves repeating until it becomes as automatic as your own name. You are the treasury. There is no other. Say that back to yourself later tonight, alone, and notice what it does to the tightness in your chest. You are the treasury. Not the world, not your employer, not the economy, the market, your family, your luck. You. There is no other source. There never was. Let me show you how this operates at the deepest level, because I don't want you to simply believe this. I want you to understand the mechanism so completely that doubt has nowhere left to stand. I am is the creative power in you. Whatever you attach to those two words becomes your command to consciousness. And consciousness, which cannot argue, cannot judge, cannot refuse, obeys. When you say, even silently, even without noticing you're saying it, I am broke, that is a command. When you say, I am waiting for this to change, that is a command. Even when you say, I am worth more than this, if it's spoken from resentment, from lack, from a wound, that is still a command soaked in poverty, and it will still produce poverty, dressed up in nicer language. This is precisely what the Barbados instruction was. When Neville came to me with no money and no ticket, I did not tell him to want Barbados harder. I told him to stop wanting it and start being there, to sleep each night as a man who was already aboard that ship, already crossing that water, already home. He assumed the state completely, not as a fantasy, but as a fact he refused to argue with. And the ticket arrived. It had to, because a state of consciousness, held with conviction, demands a world that matches it, and the world has no power to refuse that demand for very long. Why does this work? Because the world is yourself pushed out. Neville said that, and it is not poetry. It is a description of mechanics. The bank balance you're staring at is not the cause of anything. It is the shadow. It is the outer crystallization of an inner conversation you've been having with yourself for years, most of it without ever noticing you were having it. And you have been trying to change the shadow by reaching out and touching the wall it's cast on. You cannot change a shadow at the wall. You change it at the source of the light. Feeling is the secret, not thinking about wealth, not reciting affirmations you don't believe. Feeling, the actual embodied sense of already having, already being, already possessing. That feeling is the language consciousness understands, and it is the only language it responds to. Let me walk you through what this means in practice, because I want to leave nothing abstract tonight. The lack you feel is not a problem to solve. It is a command you are still giving. I need you to sit inside that sentence, because it will feel, at first, like I am blaming you for your own suffering, and that is not what I'm doing. I am handing you the only form of power that was ever real. If your financial anxiety were simply the result of no money, you would be a victim of circumstance, and there would be nothing to do but wait. But it isn't the result. It is the cause. Man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness. Neville wrote that, and I have watched it prove itself true without exception, in his life and in every life I have ever observed closely, for longer than you would believe. Think back to the man on $75 a week. Before he ever met Neville, his dissatisfaction was not a private, harmless feeling sitting quietly inside him. It was active. It was broadcasting every day, in every interaction, in the very posture of his body. Not enough, not enough, not enough. That feeling was the transmission. The world simply received it and answered accordingly, the way it always does, the way it cannot help but do. So stop treating your anxiety as information about reality. It is not a weather report on your circumstances. It is a state you are actively maintaining, moment by moment, often out of habit rather than truth. And the moment you refuse to feel poor, not by lying to yourself, but by shifting your attention and your feeling to the state of already having, you stop commanding poor. Immediately, not eventually, immediately, at the level of cause, even if the effect takes a few days to catch up, which it will. Now here is the second truth, and this one tends to surprise people the most, because it accuses the very behavior most people believe is responsible. Checking is doubt in a costume. You think that monitoring the situation, staying on top of the numbers, tracking every incoming and outgoing dollar is diligence. I understand why it feels that way. But every glance at the evidence renews the assumption of not yet. You cannot occupy the end and inspect for it at the same time. Those two acts cancel each other. It's like trying to walk forward while constantly checking behind you to see if you've arrived. The very checking proves and reinforces that you haven't. This is exactly why I told Neville not to look at the impossibility in front of him. I did not tell him to solve the problem of the ticket. I told him to walk home each night as though he were already aboard that ship, and to refuse, actively refuse, to give his attention to his empty pockets. The refusal to check was the faith, not a feeling of confidence, an action, a discipline of attention. So stop verifying. Assume the state, and then turn your back on the world the way Neville turned his back on his own poverty that winter. Let the evidence take its time proving you right. It will. It always does. But it cannot do so while you keep interrogating it before it's finished cooking. And here is the third truth, the one that reverses an order almost everyone in the world assumes is correct, without ever questioning it. You will not feel rich after the money comes. The money comes after you feel rich. Everyone has the sequence backwards, not because they're careless, but because it's what the senses teach from the moment we're born. See it, then believe it. Have it, then feel it. But the law runs in exactly the opposite direction. Assumption, persisted in, hardens into fact. The feeling comes first, in open defiance of the physical senses, which are still reporting the old condition, still insisting nothing has changed. The man earning $600 a month became the man of worth before the commission structure ever existed on paper. There was no external evidence yet. There was only a private, unshakable inward conviction, and the world reorganized itself, quietly, invisibly, to justify a self-concept that had already been settled. So stop earning the feeling. Stop telling yourself you'll allow yourself to feel secure once the money arrives. Assume it now, tonight, unearned by the standards of the world, and let the world scramble, as it must, to catch up to you. Change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world in which you live. That is not encouragement. That is a law, stated as plainly as Neville ever stated anything. Now let me give you the one practice to actually do tonight, because understanding without practice is just a beautiful idea that changes nothing. Tonight, when you lie down, Let yourself drift toward that drowsy edge just before sleep, the state akin to sleep, as it's called, that hazy threshold where your reasoning mind goes quiet and your assumptions sink in, without argument, without resistance, without the usual committee of doubts standing at the door. In that state, choose one scene, only one, a scene that would only be true if the money were already yours, already settled, already handled. Not the moment of receiving it, the moment after, the calm on the other side of it. Paying something without a flicker of hesitation, hearing a voice say, "It's handled," and feeling the quiet relief of a thing already closed. Do not watch this scene like a film playing in front of you. Feel it from within your own eyes, your own hands, your own body. Hear what you would hear. Feel what you would feel. The texture of it, the weight of it, the ordinary calm of it. And loop that single moment, gently, feeling it as real, until sleep takes you inside it. Fall asleep as the one who already has it, not the one who is hoping for it, the one who already lives there. That is the seed. But the field has to be cleared first, or the seed falls on disturbed ground. That's the revision. That's the clearing of the day I mentioned earlier. That full clearing is in the free guide, Rewrite Tonight, the first link in the description, or comment reset and I'll get you there. Do the scene tonight, regardless of anything else. But do the clearing too, if you can, and you will feel the difference by morning. You will know it by how quiet you feel. Now let me speak to the fear, because I know it's there. I know it rises the moment that number appears on the screen, the moment the notification comes through, the moment someone asks you about money in a tone that makes your stomach drop. Let me tell you plainly what that fear actually is. It is not weakness. It is not proof that you are failing at this. It is the old self, the beggar, the subject, the one who spent years waiting for permission to be worth something, fighting for its life. It knows, somewhere in its dying awareness, that you are about to stop feeding it. And it is screaming the way anything screams when it senses its own ending. Fear is faith in reverse. Neville taught that, and it is one of the most freeing sentences I know, because it means the very intensity of your fear is a measurement of how close you actually are. A dying thing does not fight hardest at the beginning. It fights hardest at the end, in its final moments, because that's when it has the least time left and the most desperation. So when the fear rises loud and sharp, I want you to recognize it for what it is, instead of what it pretends to be. The fear was never your enemy. It was proximity. Every night you lay awake, gripped by that old panic. You were not failing at this work. You were standing at the threshold. You simply didn't know yet that the door was already open. So let me speak now to the waiting, because there will be waiting, and I don't want you to misread it. The silence after you've done this work, the days where the balance hasn't moved yet, where nothing visible has changed. That silence is not evidence the law has failed you. It is not evidence of anything broken. It is the world catching up to who you became the moment you assumed the new state. The reflection always lags slightly behind the source. That is simply the nature of reflections. Persist in the assumption, and it must turn. Not might, must. So here is what I told you at the very beginning of this teaching, and here is exactly what is going to happen, because I have watched this pattern hold true without exception for longer than you know. One day, and that day is already decided, already settled, whether or not you can see it yet, a number is going to arrive that once would have destroyed you, taken your sleep, hollowed out your stomach, ruined your week before it began. And instead, you are going to feel only stillness, a quiet you won't be able to explain to anyone who wasn't here with you tonight. And in that stillness, I want you to hear my voice say it again. You are the treasury, There is no other. Remember that I told you this. There is one more thing, and it is the peace that makes everything I've given you tonight operate at a power you haven't touched yet. Nearly every teacher gets it exactly backwards. They tell you to be grateful for what's coming, to thank the universe in advance for the money that's on its way. But gratitude for a future thing is a quiet confession that it isn't here yet. You cannot thank someone for a gift they haven't handed you without admitting, underneath the thanks, that you're still waiting. In the next teaching, I will show you how Neville learned to be grateful for what he already had, before a single outer fact had changed, and why that one reversal is what actually forces the world to hand it over. I'll be waiting for you there.